Yes. Hi. Good evening, everyone. Hi. I hope my audio and video are clear, right? So you can just confirm me. So once everyone join, we'll start shortly, right? Okay. So very happy to see you, everyone, here on the Saturday evening. So today we have a market outlook session with Ajay Modi. I hope everyone know about Piper Serica and all. So we have a special guest today. So we'll give some introduction and things like that. So we'll wait for some 1 or 2 minutes for everyone to get joined. Slight echo. Okay, 1 sec. Okay, so yeah, so we can start, I guess, right? I hope more than 200 participants are there. We can start shortly, right? Okay. So first of all, welcome you everyone here for a Saturday evening market outlook session with Ajay Modi. Okay. So talking about Piper Serica, it's one of the best PMS company which we got in the small case recently. I hope many of you already gone through the list which market feed already suggested on the small case side. So on top of that, what I can say, we have started almost a quarter time with a small case. I hope most of you know that. And we have listed couple of PMS and couple of small case basket out of it. So what I can say is that the best result or the best return which is delivered by actually Piper Serica's ED plus, which is emerging dominator plus. Actually, the highest return which we have received is from ED plus. So I'm very pleasure to introduce Ajay Modi to the session. Welcome, Ajay.
Thank you, Vibin, and thank you to everyone who's taken time out on a weekend to listen to some market gossip. Uh, I am not like a very expert or a fund manager or anything of that sort. So please don't look at me like that. I am just like your next door guy who knows a little bit about markets because I have worked in the markets. Otherwise, I am just like your friend. So I will want this session ideally to be as conversational as possible. I don't want it to be a monologue where I am only talking and talking and talking, because that will lead to no outcome. Uh, so briefly, I will, before I start my monologue, I will give you my small introduction. But before that, thank you, Vibin, for organizing this. Thank you to everyone at Market Feed for bringing together almost 250 participants now. That's probably the largest crowd I have ever addressed. So thankful for that. About me, I am a founding member of Piper Serica. Piper Serica has been managing public funds for about 6.5 years now. Our track record so far has been great, touch wood. We have delivered a 25% CAGR over the last 6.5 years. We manage close to 400 crores across 3 platforms. We have a PMS where we manage about 220 crores. We have an FPI in Mauritius where we manage about another 150 crores, and then we have about 100 crores in small case. I think all put together we are about 500 crores actually now. So far it has been a great journey. Now I can see a lot of curious questions. What are what?
Yeah, so maybe I'll just give them a brief about what we are going through. So uh, so everyone see the politeness of Ajay Modi. So he's actually one of the, what I can say, one of the good presenter which I have gone through the market outlook. I have attended several market outlook with different fund managers and all, and I'm pleased to say welcome Ajay here, because Ajay, I have seen Ajay's presentation. It is very much insightful. Say for everyone, what I can say, even from the retailer to whatever the advice is, Ajay being very politeful in presenting. So that's one reason we starting with our market outlook with Piper Serica. So Ajay, can you just please disable the annotation bar? Okay, once presenting. Yeah. Okay, so speaking about Ajay, Ajay is the Vice President of Research in Piper Serica, and he's actually a CFA 3 candidate. I hope most of you guys know CFA is the one of the best qualification to become the fund manager. So shortly, we are looking into a fund manager here. So maybe hopefully he will be become the one of the best fund manager shortly. That's what I can say. So Ajay, over to you. You can start your presentation.
We've been just trying to understand how do I disable
Yeah,
and
so when you're presenting from the top, you can see the toolbar, right?
yeah.
So there you will be getting the option for disable annotation.
I can't.
So because there are a lot of participants here, so most of them show their interest by writing something on the screen.
Oh,
That's the reason I was saying. So you can just do that.
oh, 1 minute.
Okay, so we will be going through the purpose as you're asking. Basically, we are bringing like we will be starting with the market outlook, which we're gonna describe or know in detail what is happening in the market and maybe how we need to look forward on the market. That's what first 20-minute session will be. Then after we will be going through the small cases which Piper Serica have. They have three main baskets and recently launched a new one. So discussing about few of their small case basket. After that, we will be open to the Q&A session. So it will be packed for 1 hour mostly, right? Ajay, are you finding difficulty to disable?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
What I will do is I will send you the present. I have just sent you the presentation on WhatsApp. If you can share and do the needful,
No issues.
it will not waste people's time.
Yeah.
For everyone's purpose, while Vibin gave you a brief introduction, and if you're still curious, what am I going to cover here? I am going to focus my conversation on something that most investors have as a question. Is market going to correct? Where are we in terms of market activity? Is the market overheated? Is the market expensive? What should investors do? I will post by the end of the presentation what I would like you guys as viewers of this presentation to answer is what should an investor do, or to convince you uh, on what typically an investor should do when markets are volatile.
Just 1 second. Yes, Ajay, you can start. Hello.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. So I have disabled the annotation. So hope now you can easily present.
Uh, can you give me remote control? I can control the presentation then.
Yes, I have done that. So
Okay.
to the viewers, you can ask your questions. You can so meanwhile he are going through the presentation. You can type your question on the chat box. At the end of the session, I will be taking the questions. Yeah.
Great. So without too much ado, Piper Serica is a SEBI registered PMS. What we do. Okay. So we manage funds across these three platforms. And FPI. FPI is typically for non-Indians and NRIs to be able to easily invest in India. Then we have an onshore PMS, and then we have model portfolios hosted through small case. This is our performance for the last 6.5 years. And as you can see, I think apart from 1 year, we have done much better than Nifty, Nifty 500, Sensex, Nifty Multicap, funds, mutual funds, across all categories, to an extent that our 6.5 year return is 25%, against the highest return of Nifty Multicap mutual funds of 13%. Now, I will come to how we make this return, but before that, let me give you my thoughts on how do I look at markets, what should investors do, and again, what Nifty levels to invest in, should one book profit, etc., 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 etc. So very quickly, Nifty hit a peak of 18,600 on 19th October. Since then, Nifty is down to 17,760, which is down about 4.5%. Same date on 19th October, Nifty Midcap 100 hit a peak of 33,240, and since then, Midcap index is down 6.5%. Now,
Sorry.
You want to play with the presentation if we've been?
No, sorry, that you can continue.
Okay, so now 4.5% of our Nifty and 6% for Nifty Midcap, but I have seen a lot of investors saying that portfolios have experienced bigger drawdowns, about 7, 8, 9% to an extent. What are the reasons for this fall in Nifty? From what I can see, the reasons for fall is there has been selling from FIIs, increased primary market activity, which is reducing the liquidity in the secondary markets, and reduction is in leverage position. Now, what are the negatives that are working against an investor or a trader? IPOs at expensive valuation and listing at losses, which is reducing the confidence of retail investors or HNI investors. Continued rigorous selling by FIIs across categories. FIIs sold about 10,000 crore worth of their holdings in IT companies last month. They continue to sell, but they continue to sell, mind you, only from primary markets. A lot of that money is coming back in form of IPO investments by FIIs. Apart from that, continued unwinding of leverage position. There are a lot of leverage position in the system. People are keeping their stocks as margin and investing, trading very, very aggressively. But now, as markets become volatile on the negative side, a lot of this leverage position unwinding starts. Taper announcement by Fed said that they will reduce their bond buying plan from $20 billion a month to about slowly reduce $2 billion every month. Now, what that means is Fed is not going to give $20 billion to the market every month. They are going to do only $18 billion. $18 billion, for a matter of fact, is about 1.3 lakh crore. So it's still a lot of money. Fear of rising inflation and hence rising interest rate. Now there is a coherent agreement among most market participants that RBI will not cut interest rates further, and interest rates will start going up drastically. So these were the negatives. Now, what are the positives that are working in favor of me as an investor? Improved economic indicators, reduced fuel prices. Recently, the government announced reduction in fuel prices, 10 rupees on petrol and 10 rupees on diesel and 5 rupees on petrol. They also asked state governments to reduce excise duties so that petrol prices, diesel prices can be reduced further. Now, what that will lead to is reducing some amount of inflation, and hence the inflation shall, I think, come back at the 5% level, which is approximate average level of RBI guidance. Apart from that, strong corporate earnings growth we have experienced across at least our portfolio. Very strong earnings growth for this quarter, and not just earnings growth for this quarter, but a very, very strong commentary from most of our portfolio companies about what is going to come in future. I think when I speak about the positives, one positive that probably not many people are looking at is now there is no more a fear of a third or fourth or whatever number COVID wave. So I do not think a very big, large COVID wave is now around. In fact, India's total vaccination has gone to 116 crore as we speak, which means at least 80% of the population eventually will be vaccinated by at least one dose by hopefully by the end of December 2021. What that will do is that will lead to any bad outcome even in case someone gets COVID. Now, that's a very big positive because we are getting into a zone where people have now started coming out. The out of home consumption is only going up. The biggest positive that I personally see as an investor is Opportunity India. I will talk a little bit about that later. Big question, are markets expensive? As we speak, Nifty trades at 24 times FY22 EPS and 19 times FY23 EPS. Now, what's the logic of giving that data? I will tell you. Nifty's next 12 months EPS is about 828, which means Nifty is trading at 21.5x 1 year forward multiple. Historically, Nifty has traded at a 1 year forward price band of 19 times and 25 times. Currently, we are at 21.5 times. Now, if we were to go down to 19 times, Nifty is expected to go down to 15,800. That's about 10% fall from here, or 11%. If Nifty goes to 25 times 1 year forward, Nifty might trade at almost 20,300. That's a 17% rise. Now it's upon the investor to decide whether they want to fear a 11% drop or be excited about a probability of 18% rise. I think clearly the probability is on the positive side. Now, okay, 21.5x, 19x, 25x, etc. I am sure a lot of you investors have heard managers, celebrity managers coming on TV and saying, oh, market is trading at this P, that stock is trading at that P. But what is the point of P? What is the point of valuation? What does valuation say? What does valuation does not say? Now, what does valuation say? Valuation is a measure of at least 1,000 factors. What are the prominent of these? Earnings growth in a company, earnings growth in a country, margin expansion in businesses, balance sheet improvement of companies, of corporate India, of Indian incorporation, of Indian government, predictability of growth. I think a lot of investors do not look at this factor, but the higher the predictability of growth, the higher the valuation. Employment and wage growth, improved local and global participation, improved ease of doing business, improved social, political, and regulatory scenario, growth in GDP per capita. Now, these are broad factors that valuations indicate: valuations of a country, valuations of a company, valuations of an index. Now, if you look at these words very closely, you will realize that, hey, all of these are actually coming together for us. I mean, right now, we only hear from corporate India that it is becoming more and more difficult to find the right talent. In fact, to an extent that on an average, this quarter, the 1 year wage growth in India has been 21%. Now, that is probably the highest number in the last 20 years, and further expected to grow. It's not that we are stopping at 21%. What I hear from my portfolio companies is that wage hikes are going to stay, which means there will be more money with people to invest, more money with people to consume. The other thing is that today at about 6.5%, you can borrow and purchase a real estate property. Fun fact, in Mumbai, which is one of the most expensive places to buy real estate, the prices are same as what they were in 2012. So in a 9-year CAGR of real estate prices is 0%. And I mean it's 0%. Today, if you want to buy a property, the prices have gone nowhere in the last 9 years, and interest rates are at their rock bottom. To an extent, let me give you a fact or a figure. If someone takes a 1 crore loan at 6.5% interest, their monthly EMI is going to be 58,000 rupees. A 1 crore house in Mumbai has a rent of anywhere between 30 and 35,000 rupees. So 35,000 rupees of rent versus 55,000 rupees of EMI, the entire rent versus EMI or buy versus rent equation is now gone out of the window. This is probably the best time for anyone to buy a property. So before I go further in my presentation, if any one of you were looking for any thoughts on real estate, look, this is the best time to invest in real estate. The prices are going to go through the roof in the next 4-5 years. And let me tell you, my confidence is that interest rates are not going anywhere. Don't expect interest rates to go up by 1%. That's not happening. I think at best, RBI will hike interest rates by 25 basis points after 1 year. Maybe in September, October, November of 2022. I don't think a large interest rate hike is coming anywhere close. Look, for a country to progress, the central bank has to make sure that credit is easily available. So all in all these factors are coming together. Now, one Warren Buffett quote, like every other manager, I would not like to let go of this. Warren Buffett says that a true investor welcomes volatility. A wildly fluctuating market means that irrationally low prices will periodically be attached to solid businesses. And I see that actually happening right now. There are so many of my portfolio companies which are trading at the low point in the last 6 months. And these are some of the best quality companies in the country, in my view. Now, having said that, what should investors do? I think, look, if a lot of people here actively trade, let me tell you that trading is an activity for income generation. So I will not give you too many ideas on trading because I am not a trader. I am an investor. Now, when I say investor and trader, no, the two communities are not different. Traders do that for active income. But at the same time, every trader is an investor because whatever you earn, part of it you save. And what's the best way of managing your savings? By investing in high quality companies, by investing in equities of high quality companies. That's the only way you can manage and grow your savings in the most cost and return effective way. So having said that, I recommend investors to increase their equity allocations slowly and steadily. If they had a large amount of debt in their portfolio, it's a very bad time to be in debt because the yield on your debt portfolio is literally negative. The real yield is negative because you get post-tax return of about 4.5%, against which the inflation is 5.5%. So you are actually making negative returns. If you're sitting in FDs, this is the worst time to be putting your money in FDs. You are actually losing money every day. Net, Indian equities, Indian mutual funds manage about 30 lakh crore of mutual funds, out of which 12 lakh crores is in equities, 18 lakh crore in debt, that is earning negative return. About 170 lakh crore is in FDs, that's again earning negative return. And all of that money is slowly and steadily coming to the markets. India's equity participation is just about 7%. That's a population of 140 crore people and only 9 crore people actually investing in the markets. Even in worst case, if that number doubles in the next 5 years, we are talking about at least 5 lakh crore more coming into the markets. So in the short term, markets will remain range bound. There might be negative volatility, but if you ask me as an investor, it's very prudent to invest more and more of your capital in the stock markets. That's the best way you will make money. Now, where should one invest? I will come to that. But because a lot of people say India is expensive, India's market cap is $3.5 trillion. One Apple and half Microsoft is $4 trillion. So India literally is smaller than one Apple and half Microsoft. I don't think I can see any more opportunity than that. I mean, India just overtook France because France's market cap actually fell. It's not that India's market cap grew. India and France are today, I mean, this is a little dated slide. France's market cap is $3.4 trillion. India's market cap is $3.5 trillion against a GDP of $3 trillion. Now, in terms of GDP, we are the fourth largest or the third largest. Debate continues, but if you look at China's GDP is $15 trillion, market cap is $22 trillion. US GDP is $22 trillion, market cap is $50 trillion. If you ask me where will India's GDP be in the next 10 years, I think we will be north of $10 trillion. That's about 3.5 times growth from here. That's about 14% CAGR. At $10 trillion, India's market cap will be at least $15 trillion. We are at $3.5 trillion. We're expected to grow by 5x from here in the next 10 years. A CAGR of about 16.5-17%. So if anyone asks me, is India expensive? I would say India is probably the cheapest place to invest in. Now, what is driving this $3.5 trillion of market cap or $3 trillion of GDP? Three key factors: rapid digitization, formalization of economy, and demographic dividend. Rapid digitization, India does about 10 lakh crore of UPI transactions every month. That's probably by far the highest number of digital transactions, digital banking transactions that happen anywhere in the world. That's the amount of digitization that India has seen. Everyone today, even for paying 50 rupees to a neighbor side shop, you say, Bhaiya, Paytm hai kya, Google Pay hai kya? That's the amount of digitization that we're talking about. In a country of 140 crore people, 75% of the country now has access to internet. Today, you can pay through UPI without having internet. So that's the beauty of digitization. Now, what that is doing is lesser and lesser reduction in, reduction continues in black money. To an extent that I'll give you a fact. A couple of months back, I bought a new house and the seller asked me to pay some small amount in cash. And I told him, sorry, I have no cash. The reason I do not have cash, I mean, there's no way I can earn in cash. He said that, look, if you pay me 2 lakh rupees in cash, I can avoid capital gain. Now, if there are any income tax officers here, I don't want to reveal anything, but yeah, I paid small amount in cash. Fun fact, I had to actually convert my white money into black. I had to actually borrow cash from my friend and had to pay him in his bank account. That's what I had to do. I had no cash. So what that is doing is that more and more businesses are coming into formal economy. They were always there, but were not counted. Today they are counted. So digitization and formalization of economy. The third is demographic dividend. We are the youngest possible working population in the world right now. Our average age is 29. That's the youngest population in the world. And when China and Japan were at that point, from there, their GDP grew 20 times. Now it's upon you to guess where India's GDP will be. Now, in these three factors, one of the core factors is increasing GDP per capita. For the last 5 years, we have wandered between a GDP per capita of $18,000 and $23,000. Sorry, $1,800 and $2,300. Today, we are slowly inching towards $2,700 of GDP per capita. Now, why I talk about this number is that, look, every increase in this GDP per capita, which is income per person in the country per year, every increase in this amount, in this number, will go to discretionary consumption. Because if you earn 20% higher today, you will not eat 2 bowls of extra rice. You will wear better clothes. You will drive better car. The more increment that you have in your earnings, the more increment that you have in your savings, you will use that for better tourism. Instead of going to smaller locations in the same state or the same country, you will take an international tour. You will, instead of driving a 5 lakh rupee car, you will upgrade to a 10 lakh rupee SUV. That's what everyone is doing today. Instead of wearing a unbranded apparel, you will wear a branded shirt, branded trouser. So that's what increase in per capita GDP does. Now, at 29 years of average age, we are the youngest and also the most aspirational population in the world. This aspirational population does not understand save first. They want to consume first, and rightly so. A large part of their income they would like to spend on gadgets. They would like to have better quality homes. They would like to drive better quality cars. So there is a daily upgradation in standard of living. Whether market goes up or whether market goes down, people do not care. They are buying better quality stuff, which means that earnings are only going to grow. So having said that, and having used all this intelligence what have we done so far? We have grown. If someone invested 100 rupees with us about 6 years back, that 100 would be worth 455 rupees today. The same would be worth 200 or 230 in Nifty or Nifty, any multi-cap mutual fund. So we have outperformed these benchmarks by 2x. In the last 1 year, if someone invested 100, and I think a lot of people have actually done that, your 100 would be worth 150 in Nifty, 160 in mutual funds, and 175 with Piper Serica's portfolios. One of my portfolios case study, and this is an ideal outcome I would like to have, to invest in a company when it is a small cap and look at it go from small cap to mid cap to large cap to Nifty. Apollo Hospital is one such company we invested 5 years back. It has gone from small cap to mid cap to large cap, and now it is headed to Nifty. Now, how do we make this return? How do we identify companies like Apollo Hospital? It is a very simple 4-step process that we use. We are not stock pickers like most managers. We like to ideally invest in industries. Now, what kind of industries? Industries which we think will grow unparalleledly over the next 5, 10, 15 years. Industries where I see population consuming more and consuming better, which is apparel, which is travel, which is entertainment, which is financial technology, which is asset management, which is investing, which is digital India. All these industries that you see, better quality food, branded consumption, these are businesses that will grow, industries that will grow multifold. We ideally identify these industries and back the company which is number 1 by market cap. Very simple philosophy: identify industries which will grow by leaps and bounds, and then invest in the company which is number 1 by market share, because someone who's number 1 by market share will see the highest growth in that industry. Having said that, we do not blindly invest in companies which are number 1 by market share. We force rate a company. We have developed or tweaked Michael Porter's 5 forces model. This is a typical Michael Porter 5 forces model. We have 35 parameters for a company that we force rate it across on a scale of 0 to 10. These 35 parameters essentially consist of each and every moving part of the business. So supplier side economy, buyer side economy, threat of new entrants, threat of substitutes, industry rivalryness. This model essentially covers all of these points. These are 5 key points. Each of these are subdivided into 7 subparameters each, which means a total of 35. We force rate a company on these 35 parameters on a scale of 0 to 10. Only if the average score is 7 plus, the company becomes investable. Once we have identified this score, what we like to do is establish a fair value range, because at the end of the day, you are only going to pay a certain amount for a certain asset. Now, unlike most of my peer group analysts and managers who identify one particular price for a stock, we do not do that. We identify a price range. For example, very simply, if I'm looking at HDFC Bank, my price range today is 1300 to 1800, a very wide price range. If the stock goes to 1800, I will reduce my allocation. If the stock goes to 1300, I will increase my allocation. Now that's the third part of the process, and fourth part is risk management of the portfolio. When I say risk management and cover concentration risk, I have about 17 companies in the portfolio, well diversified across industry, because I have only one company industry. Liquidity risk, I do not invest in illiquid stocks, so no liquidity risk. I can liquidate my entire 500 crore of AUM in one day without having an impact cost. Valuation risk, as I told you, we establish fair value ranges, so no valuation risk as such. Now, having done all of that, these are some of my portfolio companies, and I'm very proud of them. You would know most of these companies, they're all number 1 by market share in their industry. The other bigger point to note is they're all going to be $100-200 billion industries in the future. So they are all going to be the next HDFC Bank, the next Reliance, the next TCS is going to come from here. These are very high quality companies, but at the same time, they're very expensive. Some people tell me that, oh, look, your portfolio is very, very expensive. And I have one thing to tell them. I am preempting a valuation question here. Look, if you want to buy Mercedes, you have to pay the price of Mercedes. If you want to buy Mercedes and you expect to buy a Mercedes at a price of Honda, sorry, that is not possible. But you shouldn't buy Honda at the price of Mercedes also. So you need to know what you're buying, what you're owning, and what you're paying for. So if you're buying a very high quality business, it will come at a very high price. If you're buying a very low quality business, it will come at a low price. If it is coming at a high price, don't buy it. Now, one key parameter that we like to look at in every company is we kind of test every portfolio company across Martech's law. Very few people know about this, and a very few people or actually no market participant talks about this. I haven't seen any other money manager talk about Martech's law. Martech's law is extensively being used today in the private equity investment space in the US. Most private equity and VC funds test a company on Martech's law. We are trying to learn from them. We are trying to be ahead of the curve, and hence we test the companies on Martech's law. Now, what is it? What does Martech's law mean? What we are trying to test is how agile is an organization. Is a company using technology in its back end, in its middle end, and in its front end? Does it have the ability to collect payment digitally, deliver service digitally, onboard a customer digitally, service a customer digitally, resolve a query, resolve a problem digitally? Companies which are slow to adapt. If you look at this curve, this is a organizational change curve. Now, companies which are slow to adapt will not create value. Companies which are more agile, because look at the organizational change curve, this is where it is flowing. Look at the technology change curve. Now, a company has to be very, very agile. It has to be in sync with today's changing world. If a company is still using very, very old email servers, then God help that business. So today you have to be agile. Today you have to have cloud where you are storing all your data. Today you have to have high quality data security across organizations. So these are things that we look at in every of our portfolio companies. What are the next 5-year opportunities that we see? Internet 3.0 or Internet of Business, Internet of Value. What is Internet 3.0? Let me quickly tell you what was Internet 1.0. Internet 1.0 was, or Web 1.0 was, web of information. People went to Google just to search information. Web 2.0 was web of information plus web of little bit of transaction. Web 3.0 is decentralized. Web 3.0 is all about transaction. Every problem can be solved on the internet. Every service can be bought on the internet. Every product can be bought on the internet. To an extent that India is today having ability to buy vehicles on the internet. You can literally book a car on the internet. I think very soon we'll be able to buy properties on the internet. So this is happening. This is what Internet of Value or Web 3.0 is. Blockchain, space tech, AI, renewable energy, nanotech, robots. These are all next 5, next 10-year opportunities. Now, what are we doing about that? Now, there are not many companies which give you a direct access to these emerging technologies or emerging industries, but there are a lot of them. Say, for example, Zomato. People say that it's a loss-making company. I will give you some couple of figures here. Excuse me. Okay, by no way this is a recommendation to buy Zomato, but let me give you some figures. India consumes $700 billion of food every year. Out of that, only about 8% is consumed out of home. 92% of our food consumption is inside our homes, inside our kitchens. Compared to that, in US, only 35% food is consumed inside home, 65% is consumed outside. In China, 25% is consumed at home, 75% is consumed out of home. When I say at home, I mean home cooked food. So only 8% of the food that we consumed is not home cooked. Very shallow number practically. Now $700 billion over the next 5 years, if food inflation is 7%, will go to about $1 trillion. Okay, now $1 trillion of food consumption, and if I say that even if 12% of that is consumed out of home, then we are talking about $120 billion of food consumption happening out of home. Now, if just some part of it is being delivered through restaurants, say if food delivery, because typically food delivery is 30% of the total out of home food consumption in India right now, and if that continues, we are talking about 30% of $120 billion of food delivery. 30% of $120 billion is about $36 billion. That's about 2.5 lakh crore we are talking about in rupee terms. Now, India has two food delivery companies, Zomato and Swiggy, let's say equal market share. Now, if I say that, okay, not 2.5 lakh crore, but 2 lakh crore of food delivery, or let's even reduce that further. Let's say 1.5 lakh crore of food delivery between Zomato and Swiggy. Divide that by half, Zomato will be doing 75,000 crore of food delivery in the next 5 years. That's a very low profile estimate. That's not even 1% aggressive. That's very low profile. Now, today Zomato does about 15 or 18,000 crore of food deliveries. 75,000 crore of food deliveries in the next 5 year, meaning 5x from here. Now, how many companies do you know in India that can grow 5x in 5 years? I do not know 3. So now it's anyone's guess that is Zomato expensive or is Zomato not expensive. Let me tell you one figure, one fact. All of us present here are ordering at least 3 or 4 times in a month from food delivery companies online. And that 3 or 4, which is once every weekend, is only going to increase. There is no way that you're going to reduce your Zomato or Swiggy ordering, right? Even if discounts go down, I don't think any one of us is going to stop food delivery consumption. So Zomato is one space. I mean, Nykaa is other. There are so many others. I mean, all of us are today having almost all of our money in the banks. So cut to 20 years back, probably 20% of your money was in the bank, 80% was in your cupboards. We do not do that anymore. So all of it is in the banks. Today, all of us are investing a large part of our savings. 20 years back, that did not happen. So companies which are into investment management, companies which are into broking, companies which help formalization of savings are only going to grow. Businesses which are branded food consumption are only going to grow. Financial services is only going to grow. More and more people are borrowing. I do not know industries that are not going to grow. Probably commodity, I don't know. Probably chemical, I don't know. But all of us are only going to consume more and consume better. Now, as we invest, we also have been lucky to have invested in a lot of startups. As our prop capital, we invest some amount in startups, and we see a lot of learning coming from there. These startups give us access to information that is otherwise not available to market participants. We are also in process of launching our own angel fund, probably in the next 3-4 months. But we would like to invest more and more in startups to see what is happening, where disruption is happening more and more. To an extent that when we engaged with one of our startup portfolio company, Khatabook, we came to know that there is an ad tech company called Affle India, which is doing very well, which is disrupting advertisement technology left, right, and center. It's through this access that we got to know about Affle. We invested in Affle, I think, in ED Plus portfolio 1 year back. It doubled in 3 months, and it is only growing. So that's the beauty of having access to startup ecosystem. Now, one message that I want to give you before I kind of put a stop to my monologue: look at long term. 4, 5, 6% here and there is just volatility. It is not correction. Look at long-term investing, and by long-term, what Peter Lynch means is 20 years. I do not say 20 years, but as long as you can, at least 5, 10, 15 years, you will make more money than you could imagine. And I can vouch for that fact. Now, to become a good investor, to make a good return on a portfolio, you do not need intelligence. And I can tell you that from experience. I'm not very intelligent. What you need is patience. You buy good quality companies, and that's what Peter Lim says: buy shares in solid companies with earnings power and don't let go of them. I mean, I can give you an example of a very well-known investor in India, Rakesh Jhunjhunwala. Rakesh Jhunjhunwala 2 years back had 10% stake in Titan. 10% in Titan today would have been worth 26,000 crore alone. Rakesh Jhunjhunwala's listed portfolio is worth 30,000 crore today. In that, he has 5% stake in Titan. Had he not sold his stake in Titan 2 years back, saying that Titan is very expensive, his listed portfolio would be worth about 45,000 crore today. So while people look at Rakesh Jhunjhunwala as a Warren Buffett of India, he too makes mistakes. He shouldn't have let go of Titan. Titan is like the best possible consumer company we have ever seen. Now, summing up, we have 4 strategies on small case: ED Plus, Wealth Compounder, FD Plus, India Internet. ED Plus is a portfolio of small and mid cap companies. It is also one of the best performing portfolios on small case out of about 600 plus strategies today. We rank in the top 3 in terms of 1 year and 3 year performance. Lucky enough to have doubled the money in less than 1 year in this portfolio. It's a little high volatile portfolio. We expect a CAGR of 24% here in the next 5 years. Wealth Compounder is the same portfolio as our FPI and PMS. It's a medium volatility portfolio. It's a multi-cap portfolio. We expect a CAGR of about 18% here. FD Plus is essentially a portfolio for fixed income investors. If you have money parked in fixed income in FDs and you're getting what, 5% return, I can tell you with a very good sense of comfort that you will make at least double of that in FD Plus without taking any extra risk. This is a portfolio of 12 ultra large cap predictable earnings companies that will deliver at least 12% return year on year. Not on a 5 year or 3 year basis, but year on year. That's how the quality of the portfolio is. India Internet is a thematic portfolio of companies which have a very strong internet business. Very quickly about us, we are a team of 11 people. Unlike most small case, 1 or 2 people shop, we are a very well established boutique asset management company. I'm a founding member alongside my colleagues Abhay and Rajni. Abhay and Rajni both have 25-26 years of investing experience each. Before starting Piper Serica, Abhay was one of the very senior members in JP Morgan Private Equity. Some of his successful investments include HDFC Bank, Jubilant FoodWorks, Piramal Glass, and a lot of others. I mean, to an extent that Abhay gave seed capital to Jubilant FoodWorks. Abhay's fund, JP Morgan Private Equity, at one point had 18% stake in HDFC Bank. He was a nominee director also on the board. He was an advisor to the bank. They invested about $15 million in HDFC Bank, which returned $600 million in 5 years. So he's been a career investor. Rajni has been a career investor. She was in her last job a fund manager with SBI's largest debt fund. I have been investing for the last 7.5 years. Before Piper Serica, I worked with Thomson Reuters. I was lucky enough because in Thomson Reuters, I worked with 3 very prominent clients. One was BMW Group, for whom I did a lot of economic modeling. I worked with Aberdeen Asset Management, for whom I did a lot of investment banking deal modeling. And I worked with Nomura, for which I did a lot of equity research models. So all of us have career investment background. We haven't done anything else. This is the only thing that we know. This is the only thing that we can do. That's the end of my monologue.
Yeah.
I am happy to take questions. And I'm sorry if I kind of cut through somewhere. We can cover a lot of things in the Q&A.
Definitely. So, Ajay, first of all, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, because I mean it was very clear cut. I mean, whatever the investors looking ahead, I think almost every point you have been covered here, and so very thankful to Ajay what you have taken here. Right. So we are open to questions. So everyone, if you have any questions, please put it on the chat box. So meanwhile, Ajay, I just want to go through the previous slide. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I can say is that, see, basically, if we taking ED plus, wealth compounder, and FD plus, regarding the risk, also if you can mention it, that will be really helpful for the investors. I mean,
Uh,
yeah.
okay. So, Vibin, there are two different points here. When someone says risk, I kind of get confused. What does risk mean? Is there a risk of the portfolio going down to zero? There is no such risk. Uh, is there a risk of a market correction? That's anyone's guess. Now, I think for an investor, what is important is to understand volatility, right? And ED Plus is a portfolio made up of small and mid cap companies, and hence naturally they have a little higher volatility. When I say volatility, for lack of better understanding, what I mean is, on a good day, ED Plus goes up 4% also.
Hmm.
On a bad day, ED Plus comes down 3% also. Uh, Now, on a good day, Wealth Compounder, which is a medium volatility portfolio, goes up by 1.8, 1.9%, 2% at best. On a bad day, it comes down 1.5%. FT Plus, which is a low volatility or no volatility portfolio, on a good day goes up by 0.7, 0.8%. On a bad day, comes down by 0.1, 0.2, or 0.3%. So drop, I mean, volatility on either side is high on ED plus, very low on FD plus. At the same time, the returns that will be generated are high in ED plus and low in FD plus. So the more volatility that you have ability to take, the higher the return you will make. At the same time, FD Plus is made of 12 companies which are P2C brands, which are very high quality companies with very predictable earnings growth. ED Plus is made up of young and slightly mature companies, which means they will grow more. But all these companies, mind you, are leaders in their sector. So there is no business risk in the portfolio. There is no earnings risk in the portfolio. So if you ask me what's the risk, only risk is market risk, but market risk is there in every market instrument that you invest in. I can say with a lot of confidence that ED plus, Wealth Compounder, and FD plus, the returns that I have guided for, uh, I will be able to double the money in 3 years in ED plus, double the money in 4 years in Wealth Compounder, and double the money in 5.5, 6 years in FD plus.
Definitely. So I think that that makes really good sense to the investor. So maybe I can simply put it as, maybe who's, say they themselves as an aggressive investor, they can try to look for ED plus, and moderate investors can look for wealth compounder, and who's conservative can go to the FD plus, in simple words, right? So just to conclude.
Yeah, that is right. The other point to say is that, look, if you're young, if you're in your
Yes.
late 20s, early 30s,
Hmm.
you should invest in ED plus. If you
Yeah.
are slightly in mid 30s, 40s, early 40s, you should invest in Wealth Compounder. If you are retirees, you should invest in FD plus. Uh,
So it's actually,
if
I mean, see, whatever the baskets you have created, it's basically meets everyone's requirement. That's what I understand. And
Yeah,
one
yeah.
of the
So
most
that's the
advantage,
whole idea. I mean,
yeah.
if I tell you, we are very unique as a asset management house, because I give opportunity to someone who wants to invest 75,000 through India Internet.
Mm.
So I give opportunity to a retail investor to benefit from my strategy, from my research. I give opportunity to an HNI to invest through the PMS. I give a opportunity to an ultra HNI also to invest through the PMS. I give the same opportunity to an international investor, a Russian, an Australian, an American also, to invest in India through our FPI. So I am ticket size agnostic. At the same time, I will give you option to invest in high volatility, medium volatility, low volatility portfolios based on your risk appetite. So that's my end goal, to be able to serve investor of every size and investor of every risk appetite.
Definitely. Okay, so that's it. I mean, so we can stop the presentation here. So we will be moving with the questions. Okay, right. Okay. So Ajay, before that, I can see that a lot of investors who are here is really appreciating your time and your presentation, because
Thank
everyone
you.
getting good feedback from them, right? So Matthews is asking, which are the industries you are focusing for the next decade? I mean, what might be the industries will be bullish for the next 10 years range? I think you already
All businesses, all industries which have a high proportion of digital in them. And when I say that, I don't just say that like every other market participant. I will tell you industries. I am very bullish on healthcare. I am very bullish on consumer technology. I am very bullish on insurance. I am very bullish on formalization of savings. Now, at the same time, there are industries like travel, entertainment, which will also do well. So I'm very bullish on all industries that are consumer facing, where wallet share of investor, wallet share of customer is going up. Companies which are into depository business like CDSL, companies like InfoEdge, which are every day giving new and new opportunity to investor to invest in both startup and their own core digital business. Companies like Angel Broking, another portfolio company of mine, which is into digital broking, growing by leaps and bounds. I'm very bullish on manufacturing. We have companies like Dixon in our portfolio. Very bullish on food consumption. So we have both Jubilant FoodWorks, which is the largest brand in India, and Zomato, which is the largest food delivery platform. So anything that's got a little bit of technology and consumer facing, and where millennials are consuming more and more, I'm very bullish on.
Yeah. So basically, you are very bullish on the digitalization part and consumption stories, because as
Definitely.
you mentioned, the per capita income increases. Definitely, the consumption is also things that we definitely look forward, right? Okay. So next question is from Gio Syriac. Is asking, okay, you have mentioned about investing in startups. So he's asking how a retail can participate into investing into a startup, and maybe I'll add a question. Should retailers consider to invest into startup companies?
I would say no. Look, startups in startups, what happens is the mortality rate of my startup portfolio, whenever I do it as a fund, will be very high. What I mean is that, look, when I invest in 100 companies, 65 will die. They'll go to zero. That's not the case with listed market investment. So the risk in startup investing is very, very high, and hence there is no direct route for small investors to invest in startup. And I wouldn't advise also. I mean, investing in startups is for investors who are very late in their investment cycle. They have a large portion of investment in mutual funds, decent investments in concentrated portfolios like PMSs, good investment in AIFs, and then comes startup. And early stage startup is even more risky. So I wouldn't recommend.
Okay, so can you add this with the IPO buzz which is going around, because now the Paytm, which is listed on a discount, that made a lot of issue with the IPO investors. So can you comment on that part?
Okay, so good question or good thought here. Look, at the end of the day, what matters is the maturity of the business model. How predictable, how clear is the business model? Now, why I am investing in Zomato and why I am not investing in Policybazaar or Paytm is because Paytm does not have a very clear business model. I do not know what Paytm does. I mean, if anyone here knows, please help me understand it. While I can very easily model growth for companies like Zomato, there is very clear visibility of people consuming more and more food through delivery platforms. The same is not the case with Paytm. Paytm is in financial services. Financial services is the most competitive industry in India. By far the most. I mean, you have big daddies like HDFCs and ICICIs of the world. I do not know how Paytm survives and thrives in that business. In their payment business, they compete with PhonePe and Google Pay. UPI, which is the backend, is completely free, so I don't know how they will make money on payments. And then now, to show profits, they're trying to diversify into old world business of distributing or doing broking or distributing insurance. So Paytm is a business that I would personally stay away from forever. Not just today. I would literally stick my neck out and say that I'm not investing in that company for the next 5 years. Besides, I do not like the quality of the management. I do not know if any of you got to see the recent interview that Vijay Shekhar Sharma, the founder of Paytm, had on CNBC. He's very, very unpolite. I mean, that's not the quality of management that you would want to trust on. He was asked a lot of questions and he did not give any direct answers. I would really stay away from management like that. So that's on Paytm. Companies like Policybazaar do not have any peer globally. So insurance aggregator model hasn't worked out that well. That is why, in fact, Policybazaar, if anyone read their DRHP, Policybazaar is using the funds that they raised to become an insurance broker. So they are also going to do what every other insurance distributor does. So there will be no differentiation. So there is no tech game there. In fact, in insurance, the tech game is by companies like Acko and Digit, which are pure digital insurance manufacturers, the policy underwriters. Companies like Nykaa are very good, but very, very expensive because there is competition from MyGlam, Purple, TataClick. So that is why Nykaa at this price I would stay away from, or I would invest once we see Nykaa quoting at about 1,500 rupees or about $10 billion, not more. $10 billion market cap is tops for me for Nykaa. You will have more and more such digital companies. You will have MobiKwik coming with IPO. I think Ixigo is another travel platform that is coming with an IPO. As an investor, one thing I would like to guide myself and to all other investors is that look at the business model, ask yourself if you are going to use that service more and more. If the answer is yes, go look at it, go buy it. If the answer is no, stay away from it. Valuation will not matter there. If you ask yourself, are you going to consume more and more food online? The answer is yes, go buy it. If you ask yourself, are you, or if for male members here, are your wives going to order more and more accessories and shop more and more online? The answer is yes. So Nykaa is a yes. But how many times are you going to buy policy in your life? If it is a term policy, once. If it is a health policy, twice. So how many times is a policy distributor going to make money from you? I don't know. And payments is going to be free forever. So I don't know. No answers there. You will have travel platform companies coming with IPO. EasyTrip is already listed, but again, no clarity on how they will make money. At the end of the day, what drives is profit. At the end of the day, what drives is growth. If there is no clarity on growth, if there is no clarity on profit, I as an investor would stay away.
Okay. So,
but yes, if you want to invest in startups, a lot of startups will come to listing now. Yeah. They are getting to that stage. I mean, Zomato is still a startup, listed. Nykaa is a startup listed. So you will have more and more startups that will come, that will list. And I think startup is a very fancy word. At the end of the day, you as an investor need to invest in high growth businesses. That's it.
Right. Okay. So I think we got the straight point on the IPOs and listed IPOs and coming up IPOs directly from Ajay sir. And maybe what I take from your presentation regarding the IPO part is that, or the company's part, basically the companies which we can see the future earnings or the predictability of the earnings.
Yeah.
That's what we should invest into. So that's what the main takeaway which I have seen in your presentation. The predictability, maybe the HDFC and Infosys, that point of time as well, the predictability was there and people are ready to pay the premium. So maybe that point also we need to look for when we going for an IPO investment as well, right? So I got the point directly. And okay, next from Ranjit Wamanan saying very nice and easy to understand presentation. Thank you so much. I'll take Ranjit's name because he's always one of the regular viewer and he asked many questions as well. So I'll take his name. Yeah. Shamsuddin asking about the expense ratio, 2.5 percentage expense ratio. Can you just explain about the expense ratio and why 2.5 percentage, things like that better?
Why 2.5%? Because we cannot do profit share model on small case. Now, when I say
maybe see, there are few small case with flat fee model. Maybe only you are introduced with the percentage. So
I think what happens is that look, I also now have a flat fee model, right? I have India Internet Opportunities, which is a flat fee portfolio. The problem with flat fee portfolios is I have so many people who have subscribed, paid the fees, but not invested. Now, if they have not invested, it is not right of me to collect money, right? So that's something that I do not like about flat fee portfolios. In a sense, if this would have not been the case, then I would have had flat fee that look, you pay me X amount and then you invest how much ever you want. I don't care, right? The other is that look, flat fee in broking business is understood because it's a commodity. Whether you buy one stock or 100 stock of a company, whether you invest 50 rupees or 500 crore in the stock market, it does not matter to the broker. But when it comes to investing, it's a very proprietary business. I mean, I do a lot of research. I have a large team to cater to, and hence, I think 2 or 2.5% is a justifiable fees. Now, if you look at the kind of fees is one side of the game. If you look at the return that you make, I am just asking you for 10% of that return as my fees. I do not think that's overboard, but yes, I mean, we would look at more fixed fee models if there is no barrier. So yeah, I would put it at that. Now, for someone who wants to understand the fee structure, look, 2.5% plus GST would be about 2.9, whatever. Now I will tell you how the fee structure works is when you invest 2.5 lakh rupees every 30 days from your first investment, the fee gets debited. How much fee gets debited from your bank account? About 700 rupees. So for you to be able to double your money, double your 2.5 lakh to 5 lakh in 3 years, you're just paying 700 rupees a month to me. I don't think that's too much that I'm asking for. So yeah, that's on the fees.
see, definitely. I mean, you you guys are definitely putting a lot of effort and research on that set. So paying 700 or some 2.5% doesn't matter because if we able to make good enough return, so that's not.
I think good returns. I think
I
apart from
mean,
good return, one important thing that I put in as a culture in my organization, and I keep saying that to my investors, is transparency. Now I try to communicate. I send out letters every month. I do webinars every month with investors, partners, to make sure that they know what we are doing, right? I don't want to hide. I mean, my portfolio is out there. I told you in the presentation that this is what I do, this is what I don't do. I think that at the end of the day, what matters is transparency also. I'm very transparent, unlike most money managers who want to hide their portfolios.
and see, one of the key feature that we are with Piper Serica, one of the key feature what we identified, the rather than the return, the consistency on the small case baskets, that's what we are more interested in comparing to other peers, right? Okay, so Arjun Singh is asking about any market crash or anything expected. I mean, you get this question to every webinar, even though once again I'm saying that. I mean, you can put it as any the risk which we have as a macro factor, any kind of risk, say China issue or something similar to that.
Look,
Anything
what is
we
a crash? A crash is a drop in. I mean, when was the last time we saw a crash? 2020 March, when markets fell 30%, right? That fall of 30% was because of an unseen, unknown, unheard of event.
yeah.
Now, crash will happen because of unseen, unknown, unheard of events. So how will I tell you about that? Because I have not seen them, I have not heard about them, I don't know them. So I don't think
So maybe
from whatever we know, let's be honest.
as you already mentioned, the maybe you can put it as the upside and downside figures. That will be really helpful. I mean,
So from simple mathematics, the upside is 16-17% from here in the immediate term. The downside is 10-11% from here in the immediate term. I do not think we are going down 10%, honestly. Because after a particular fall, we see a lot of money starts coming back in, saying that, okay, whatever is happening. And I will tell you what, I experienced a very large drawdown. My portfolios fell 10% in the month of October. From the peak of around 15th of October to the end of October, the portfolios fell 10%. Now, for the entire month of October, actually, the return was negative 1% or so, because the portfolios went up 9-10% in the first 15 days, came down 9-10% in the next 15 days. But all of that recovered. Now, this month we are at about 6-7% growth already for this month. I do not say monthly growth of 6% is what I will guide for. I am just saying that, look, portfolios did fall 10%, but came back and are in positive 4-5-6% territory now. I do not know about markets, but what I can tell you is that, look, good quality stocks, if they fall by a large number, there are a lot of good quality investors chasing those stocks. They will all come back buying them.
Definitely. Okay. So we are moving to the next one. Matthew's asking about the SIP, about ED plus and FD plus. So say adding to that question, Ajay, if you look into the current market, what mode of investment will be more you will be preferring, SIP route or lump sum, say buy on the dip lump sum, that you will be better, which
So
you suggest?
I do all three personally. I mean,
Even
and
yes.
in small case, the only way you can do is you can start with 2.5 lakh rupees. So if I was the investor, what I would do is I would start with 2.5 lakh rupees, and then whatever is the minimum monthly SIP on small case platform, I will do that monthly SIP also, depending on my savings. And at the same time, if I get like a 7-8-9% correction, I will do a more top up also. So that's how I practice personally. I mean, that's what I do. I don't know if you remember, I told you in the last webinar that we had, I had kept a small corpus to repay one car loan that I had. I decided that, look, that car loan is at 7% interest rate. Yeah. Markets have fallen 10%. Let's put that money in the stock market. Now, whatever money that I had put in that, taking that money, instead of not paying the car loan, the money that I put in the markets have now grown to a point that my next 3-month EMI can be taken care of.
Definitely, that's a beauty of market, right? Okay, cool. So one second. Next question. Prashant is asking, can NRI invest in all these small case basket?
NRIs can invest provided you have a demat or trading account with one of the small case partner. I mean, if you have a trading account with Zerodha, Upstocks, Angel Broking, any of these guys, you can just go and invest in like few clicks.
Okay. Shamsuddin asking, can you suggest right time to put investment into small case?
Shamsuddin, every time is the right time. It depends on your outlook. I am investing for my retirement. So whenever I get more money, I invest. And honestly, even if I look at from a short and medium term perspective, where else do I put my money in? I mean, if I put it in a liquid fund, I get what, 3.5%. In fixed income instruments, 4.5%. I would better go and put that in good quality equity portfolio. And I do not think you will ever be able to find the right time.
Okay. So next from Rajendra Singh, he's saying, so first of all, yes, thanks for the wonderful presentation. And what will be the extra charges we have to pay? Will we have to pay on every investment on or redemption? So in addition to the 2.5 expense ratio, any other charges?
So we do not have any other charges. But depending on your broker, now if you're using the digital brokers, there are no brokerage charges, but there are very small STT and GST and all of that. Typically on a 2.5 lakh rupee investment, that's a one-time charge of about 50-60 rupees, 100 rupees. I don't think more. Again, that all depends on the broker. We do not have any other extra charge. We do not have any exit load, any lock-in, nothing of that sort.
Okay, next one from Solomon Abraham. So he's also thank you for the sharing your views and insight about the market. And his question is, do you expect any disruption on the current way market leading companies operate due to the introduction of blockchain technology? And how does this will affect the stock market? So stock market and maybe blockchain or cryptocurrency. Any?
So cryptocurrency is one application of blockchain, but blockchain as a technology, one, it has been around for 10 years now. It's not a new technology. Now, how will it affect? Blockchain is a very strong proponent of decentralization. So it will affect the way financial system works. It will affect uh, the way asset management works, the storage of records works, to an extent that Maharashtra State Board is issuing education certificates on blockchain. The CBSE board is issuing education certificates on blockchain. If you are in Maharashtra, the e-pass that you receive after having yourself vaccinated is on blockchain. The beauty of blockchain as a technology is it is very, very cheap. It's super inexpensive. You do not need likes of TCS, Infosys to do your backend management. So that will affect a lot of things. But will that disrupt anything? It will disrupt old businesses. Uh, will it lead to disruption in stock exchanges? Uh, yes, there is a risk of stock exchanges going out of the business if you can just trade stocks on a blockchain. Uh, Anything that's about record keeping, anything that's about digital transaction can be disrupted by blockchain. Now, having said that, uh, I do not think NSE or BSE will go out of business. Instead, they will use blockchain as a technology for running their day-to-day operations instead of whatever they're using now. I think that's what will happen.
Definitely. Roni Jacob is asking, what is your take on investing in cryptocurrencies? So he's just curious, he said. So adding to that question, say, if you look into the asset allocation or as an investor, how should, at this current market condition, how much should be my allocation? Say, how much should be allocation to equity, debt, and say adding to this cryptocurrency? Yeah.
So asset allocation depends on the age, right? Now,
Yeah.
the younger you are, the higher your proportion of equity should be. If you ask my asset allocation, 85% is equity, 10% is debt. 4.5% is cryptos. So yeah, I also do a little bit of cryptos. I've recently started, did a lot of homework, did a lot of research on understanding what we should do. Now, honestly, if you ask me, cryptos is nothing more than punting. I am just taking a aspirational call on something I don't know about. But at the same time, there is some information, there is some semblance around it. I do not think cryptocurrencies will ever become mainstream. Because for cryptocurrencies to become mainstream, it will lead to the complete change of establishment globally, which means governments will go out of business. I don't think that will happen. I mean, people who control the world will not let go of that control easily. But which cryptocurrencies, how much asset allocation? I think you should put so much money that you are okay to lose completely. Now, if you have say 10 lakh rupees of investable corpus, I would advise you to play with 10,000, 20,000, 25,000. Learn about it, understand the volatility, see if you can digest that volatility, and then go about it. Don't play around with the smaller unknown ones. If you have likelihood and would want to experiment with cryptos, go try the Bitcoins and the Ethereums, the mainstream ones, because at least they are not going out of business completely today. Now, each of the currencies underlying value is its blockchain. Now, which is the most valuable blockchain today? Bitcoin and Ethereum. Most of the NFTs that are issued today are issued on Ethereum. Most of the record keeping that businesses are using on Ethereum blockchain. So I think Ether is a good cryptocurrency to experiment with. But again, disclaimer, this is not my advice. I am not asking you to invest in, I am just giving you my personal experience. Look, invest so much money that you're okay to lose.
Okay, so I'm also assuming that you have some allocation to Ethereum anyway.
4%. I told you, I will not lie about it. Only Ethereum,
Okay.
no other cryptocurrency.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
very fascinated about Ethereum. So.
Cool. That's I mean, it's very glad to know that.
Don't ask me about NFTs. I haven't experimented about them. So,
Okay, I mean, we have, as a community, we are also exploring cryptocurrencies. From the last month, we have good discussions around them, and as you know, Sharik also doing a presentation on, I mean, classes on that. Okay, so hopefully we will be, educate. We will do more education side on crypto, and maybe we also update you, right?
definitely.
And
If anything about Ethereum, I will be happy to give you my thoughts. I have spent 6 months doing my research before I said that I will invest. So,
definitely. So, yeah, next, maybe we will wrap up in 10 minutes. I'll take the questions first. Okay. So, Arjun is asking about metal or steel sector, any view? Because
Arjun, I
metal,
personally do not, as a policy, we do not invest in cyclical businesses. We do not invest in commodity businesses. We do not invest in public sector enterprises. So, and the reason is because, look, cyclical businesses, you have to get your timing right. They are not compounders. You can't say that Tata Steel, which is selling 60,000 crore of steel today, will sell 6 lakh crore of steel 10 years from now. I don't think that the country needs 6 lakh crore of annual steel consumption at all. So metals and cyclicals are very, very timing dependent. I can see you're asking these sectors connecting to China. China is a very opaque country. No one has any information about them. They do any new thing any day. They're capable of doing whatever they want. They are capable of putting supply constraint. They are capable of easing supply constraint. So anything that's related to China, I would better stay away from.
okay, cool. So, yeah, I can see, say Arjun, Abdul, few of them are asking about the last couple of weeks FII selling. So, any view on that, say?
Look, FIIs have made good money in the last 1 year. I mean, if you understand how FIIs operate, they are money managers entrusted with capital from some large funds, pension funds, some large allocators, family offices. Now, December will be a time when they will go on holiday. So before going on holiday, they want to show some money. I mean, that's the only reason that they will. And it's not just in India. Typically, November, December are months where they will liquidate from all emerging markets, young economies. But in India, more so largely because a lot of FI investors are taking money off from secondary markets and putting that in IPOs. So while FIs have sold like 9,000 odd crore or 10,000 odd crore in the last 20 days, they have also invested about 8,000 crore through IPOs. So net selling is just about 2,000 crore. And if more IPOs come, they will have to sell more because the pocket is so much, right?
Okay, cool. So, Anais Sunesh is asking about what's your view on gold investing, gold plus equity, maybe.
You should have 5, 7, 8% allocation to gold. You should have so much allocation to gold that you think someday you can consume. I do not think a large amount of gold is makes too much sense, other than just giving some support to the portfolio in terms of volatility. I wouldn't advise more than 10% allocation to gold.
Okay. So maybe I'll add another question here. So if someone is at their 30s, so how much should they invest into ED plus? I mean, overall their investment allocation, how much percentage should be there in ED
A
plus?
large part of their investment should be ED plus. Look, whether you're in your 30s or 40s, if you have say anywhere about 2.5 lakhs or above, the higher that you do, the better for me. But anywhere that you have 2.5 lakh or above, and you don't want that money for the next 5-7 years, put it in ED plus, you will make more money.
Okay. So Shajir Appal is asking about EV small cases. Maybe if you can comment on the EV sector.
Very early space for India. I think we have a long distance to go. We will burn more money in EV before we start making money off EV. And a disruption will first come in two-wheelers. We're already seeing that with what Ola is doing and what Ather Energy is doing. I don't know how the road down 10 years will look like. So limited insights there.
Okay. So okay. So next question is on the inflation side. What is your comment on inflation?
I think inflation is under control now. A lot of see earlier, if you ask me 6 months back, I was also of the belief that RBI is giving fake guidance. The inflation is actually out of control. But what we have seen in the last 6 months is that as more and more economies, like we are lucky enough as a country that we are open, like no lockdowns and all. If you have had opportunity to travel to countries in the Middle East, in other Asian regions, you will see that there are localized lockdown supply constraints still persisting, which is why there are some pressure on the raw material side across businesses, which is why there are price hikes, which is why inflation is a little high. Uh, some people are saying crude will go to $100. I don't think so. So I don't think that inflation will beat the RBI mark of 5.5, 5.75%. I don't think that's happening anytime soon. In fact, I think with food, with the second winter season of the crop being good, and now with the government coming and repealing farm laws, no comments on politics, but I think a lot of agitated farmers will go back to business. We will have more crops, food price inflation will come off, and hence I think inflation will stay largely under control. I do not think inflation, because there are a lot of people who say that inflation is going to spiral out to 7% and beyond. That's all joke. That's all what we call adrenaline rush. People will tell you that, look, oh, inflation will go to 10%, because when they say, you will give them attention. So they are just seeking your attention. Inflation is not going to go beyond 6%. That's the tops.
Okay. So maybe one last question and we will wrap it up. So say there are more traders in the community. So what I want to say is, someone taking swing trading, maybe someone looking for hold some stocks for a couple of 1 or 2 months or maybe 1 or 2 years, right? So to them, or say if you're looking to the next 5 years, what are the government rules, regulations, reforms that we are expecting, or maybe any threats that on that side, government regulations will affect the stock market or something similar?
See, I don't think, I mean, look, this government has, I mean, there was in the last 60 years, no government that actually made a stock market participant, right? I'm talking about Prime Minister meeting Rakesh Jhunjhunwala. That's a rare instance. Even otherwise, this government has kind of shown some comfort, some sense of semblance towards the investing community. They want investing community to grow. They want investors to grow. They want more. I mean, look at the government. What is their ideal outcome? That businesses do well, economies do well, people do well. So they will come back in power again. Now, why will they want to derail any momentum? I don't think there is any large negative risk from the government side. Now, any regulatory risk on any specific industry, financial services industry is always exposed to regulatory risks. Pharma exporters are always exposed to regulatory risk. Other than that, I don't think we are looking at any large regulatory risks. In fact, I will tell you what, before I leave, I will tell you that, look, the risks are only on the positive side. As the country opens up more and more, as people travel more and more, the flow of money will gather momentum, which means a lot of businesses which were struggling will also come back, which means lending will grow. As economy grows, the targeted growth rate of 8, 9, 10%, the credit growth in the country will remain strong. Now, if the credit growth in the country remains strong, the flow of money will only gather more and more momentum, which only helps stock markets. So in the medium term also, forget the long term, in the medium term also, I am not worried. I mean, as an investor, I will tell you that, look, I look at myself and I look at my friends, people around me, only consuming more and more on weekends. They don't want to sit at home. They want to travel. They want to spend. I mean, if you look at the propensity of consumption, just the sheer propensity of consumption, forget everything else. The country is consuming so much that if you invest right, you will make money, even in the short term.
Okay.
But as a message for traders at the same time is that, look at trading as your business, as your occupation, as what you do daily. That is an exercise that you do for income. Don't look at that as your investing experience. Your trading experience is different from your investing experience. Don't mix your trading pocket with your investing pocket. Even if you have a very large trading pocket, make sure you are using your savings wisely, because there will be a time when you will retire, or there will be a time when you will want to retire early, or there will be a time when you want to suddenly say, boss, I am too tired of my lifestyle now, I want to take a 1 month break and go and sit, enjoy in the Himalayas. You will need money for that. You will get that money not from your trading basket, you will get that money from your savings and investing basket. So I would like to conclude at one point that, look, forget, I mean, I have seen myself grow. I have seen my investors. I see market community every day. I can tell you the market community is so excited about adrenaline rush. They only want news. And I don't know what you will do with so much news. Yeah, I don't know what you will do if I tell you there is going to be a correction. Anyone knows whether there will be a correction? No. Anyone knows if markets will go up 10% in the next month? Highly likely, but probably not. Who knows? At the end of the day, look, what matters is you're saving money. Forget, close your ears. Don't, with your savings, don't look at CNPC. With your savings, don't look at ET Now. With your savings, don't listen to me. Don't listen to Vibin also. With your savings, just close your eyes. Invest in the right quality stocks. Invest in the right quality portfolios, whether mine or someone else. Invest with discipline. Follow one discipline, that you will invest your savings, that you will invest every spare money that you generate into good quality assets. You will be rich, and when you're rich, you will not need to listen to me or Vibin. So I will only want to leave you with this message that, look, don't listen to anyone, just invest in good quality businesses. You will make a lot of money. Forget everything else. Close your ears, close your doors and windows about your savings. You will make money as long as you are invested in the right stocks.
So the key thing is patience. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there is no IQ in making money. Radhakishan Damani made money because he patiently kept investing in his DMart business every year. He forgot everything else. He did not see what is happening to Big Bazaar, what is happening to Reliance, what is happening to Amazon. He just kept on investing. No? I mean, today he's rich. So invest wisely. I mean, look, I will tell you, I know I am stretching this. I will tell you that there are 85 companies who have grown year on year after they listed, out of 3,223 companies. So less than 2.5% companies have actually made money. Now you have only 85 great quality companies. Whether you invest in my portfolio, or whether you invest in Tom, Dick and Harry small case, or whether you invest in Tom, Dick and Harry PMS, you have only those 85 companies. I am lucky to have 16, 17, 18 out of them. They are gold. They are worth their weight in gold, platinum, silver, diamond. I don't know what. Don't sell them. Don't look at 10% drop and say that I'm going to sell the best of my assets. Some people tell me that, look, your portfolio is very expensive, and then ask me, what if this portfolio falls? I tell them, boss, this is the most expensive asset that you have. That is what you just told me. So am I ever going to sell my most expensive asset? Never. Unless there is a need, unless there is a plan that you had with that investment, don't sell it. Just keep investing more and more money. You will be rich. Thank you. Vibin, you can give your closing remarks. I will stop.
Okay, so it's actually, I mean, it's actually very long session, to be frank, 1 hour and 30 minutes.
I know, I like to talk.
And you can see that still there are more participants who have joined in the beginning, and I can say that there are many closing notes saying thanks to Ajay. So Prashant, Arjun, Jibin, Rishabh, Raghu, Shamsuddin, Priyan. I mean, a lot of thanking note you can see on the chat. That itself showing that, I mean, it was a great session, and it have really delivered so much value and insight to the viewers. So really, thank you, Ajay, and thank you everyone who have joined in the session. And I mean, happy weekend to everyone. Yeah,
Thank you.
we can close the session. Thank you, everyone. Bye.